Warning: the Mended Futures podcast contains stories told by guests that may be sensitive to some people. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. The opinions expressed by guests do not reflect the views of the hosts and/or producers of this podcast.
Taylor,
Allison,
we had a guest today that is going to turn into a two-parter.
yes, it's our first two-parter, if you can believe it.
Yes. And it was what I thought it was going to be.
In a good way, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So today we talked with Claudia Fletcher, who is a chief officer here at 518 Family Services, but she also plays a huge role in an organization called Care Portal.
Which you might remember from our episode with Adrienne Lewis, who founded Care Portal, if you listened to that one. Yes.
So the first part of Claudia's story is about being an adoptive parent. And
12 times over, by the way.
yes. So talking about her role in the adoptive foster care space, both as a wife, a mother, and a professional.
Mm-hmm.
So we hope you enjoy part 1 and definitely make sure that you come back for part 2.
We hope you enjoy. So for those of you who don't know, we're actually filming this episode in January. And as I was thinking about kind of my goals for 2025, my greatest desires for 2025
Oh, you have them this week?
this week,
Okay.
and one is actually coming true right now because I was thinking what I would give to be locked in a room with Allison Jordan and Claudia Fletcher.
Yay!
It's an escape room. So if you crack the code, we'll let you out.
And if not, we'll be here all day.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Hi.
I think that's a compliment.
So welcome and tell the people who you are.
Personally, professionally,
All of it.
all of it. Who am I? Well, I am a wife to a pastor. And we have served, we're on our 10th congregation that we've served. We've traveled around a lot, met a lot of really cool people in a lot of places. We lived in Virginia for 9 years. The story is Mr. Day stalked me on LinkedIn. And when I was high on Vicodin with a back injury and asked me if I wanted to apply for this job, and we didn't know a single person in Virginia. So had 4 people that I asked, and they all said yes. So I told God, I guess you want me to go. So we moved here. So I'm the chief program officer.
If you weren't high on Vicodin when he asked you, do you think you would have still considered it the same way?
That's a good question. And I think the answer is no, I wouldn't have.
Wow.
Because I was in a job that I loved,
Yeah.
doing what I thought I was going to do until I retired. And that was my plan. And if I wasn't laying in bed high, I wouldn't have had time to even think about
Yeah.
looking it up or anything. I would have been like, oh no, I'm happy, thank you. And I never would have Googled it. But I'm like sitting here, literally can't move with my
Immobile.
phone. And I'm Googling and learning about it.
There you go. And here
And-
you are, our chief program officer.
And here I am 9 years later, same role, same boss, same,
Mhm.
not the same organization. We
Right.
changed a lot, but the same thing. So, yeah. So that's part of who I am, chief program officer, wife, mom to 12 kids,
Mhm.
and grandmother to 15 that we call ours, even though they're not, like, none of them are related by blood, so you can't use that. But some of them are connected to some of our other grandchildren or some of our
Mm.
in-laws, like
Mhm.
son-in-laws, or whatever.
Do you say 15 and counting? Because I would imagine.
Yeah, we probably have a few more coming.
Mm-hmm.
And we have one foster grandchild right now, which is
Ooh,
kind of cool.
Cool.
So 16 are the ones that
Mhm.
that I,
So does that mean your kids are fostering someone?
yes,
Cool.
one of my sons' girlfriend is fostering and they live together. So he's in the picture doing that. So it's
Gotcha.
a fictive kin placement with one of her friend's kids that
Mhm.
she's known all his life. He's 3. He's very cute.
Oh, good for her.
So I'm a mom, I'm a grandma. I hope I'm a good friend. I guess that's who I am.
And I know you enough to know why you answered that way or why you asked that question, because you constantly want people in the space, Christians, helpers, doers, to think about, who are you in so many ways? Who are you as a neighbor? Who are you as a wife, as a family, as a professional? So it would only be fitting that you answered that way.
Yeah.
So think about that, audience.
Yeah, think about that.
And then what is God asking you to do in each of those roles? You know, because we haven't even got to Care Portal. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I'm the Care Portal point person at my church and have been since Care Portal started and in the churches that we've served. And that's one of my favorite roles in my life. But it's very different than the fact that I'm the field director for Care Portal on a high level and how that all fits together. So, yeah, I think all of us have a need to say, okay, God, what are you calling me to do as a person, as a friend, as a neighbor, as a wife, as a mother, as a grandmother, as a professional? What are you calling me to do and how can I do it?
I call that concentric circles. So I always think about, who am I or who are we? And then the broader ripple or the concentric circles. And I don't know if everyone thinks about things that way, but it's a neat but also daunting. There are lots of responsibilities if you think about who you are in many circles.
And I think that to answer your unasked question, no, people don't think like that. They don't even use words like that. Like concentric circles, no, they don't even know what that means. But they may think of themselves, as having layers or being, associated in different ways. But I doubt very many
concentric circle is skee ball, right?
Well, I know what a concentric.
I know, but for people who don't know, that's what it is. Circles inside circles.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
You two are funny. I was like, I'm not even gonna have to do anything this episode. You two,
yes, you are. You're gonna have to moderate.
You've adopted 12 children.
Yep.
Where did that begin?
So it goes way back.
Yeah.
To when my husband and I were in college together, and he was afraid of me. And if he was here
it's a
right
great
now,
start.
His favorite line as my side man or whatever is to say, I still am. He likes to say that. But I was a sophomore. He was a freshman. Now, his story is that I plopped down. I don't know why he always says I plop, but he does. I plopped down in front of him and said, I've been looking at all the freshmen and you're the one I think I should marry. Now, if I did that, I don't think he's lying. I'm sure it was probably a scarring memory that I did that. But if he's not lying, I don't remember doing it to him, but I'm guessing I did it to all the freshmen just to freak him out because that's who I was when I was a sophomore in college. So I said that to him.
That's still who you are.
And then he spent like 3 years avoiding me. So he was scared of me.
Poor Bart.
Schedule Bart Fletcher as a
518 counseling.
Yes. Get him some counseling and schedule him for.
Hey, let's get your side of the story.
Right.
And he's heard me tell this many times, and so he usually pipes in. But anyway, we were friends together, kind of friends. I called him my friend. I don't think he even thought I was his friend. So this is a little side thing that might get edited, but in our small Christian college, we had a cool side of the cafeteria and a nerd side of the cafeteria. Okay, so my first year, I was on the nerd side, but that summer I stayed on campus with a bunch of people who were on the cool side, and I got in with the cool people.
Let's go.
So I was sitting with the cool people. He always sat with the nerd people. Well, come to find out later, the nerd people thought they were better than the cool people because we thought that we were better than them, and that made them holier than us because they were not sitting with the people who thought they were cool. So
that could be a whole podcast episode in itself. Like, why is there a cool and a nerd side of a Christian college cafeteria?
In a college cafeteria in general.
Well, yeah, because there was literally small enough that there was only 150 kids on campus, and so it was small enough that you could actually have half and half.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was in student government with him. He was a student body president. But we never dated, and I called him my friend, but later I think I probably didn't think he was mine. But anyway, 10 years later, we're planning a youth conference together. I've already gone and done several things. I've been a vice president at the college that I went to. He's been a youth pastor and a pastor. We reconnect because we're on this committee planning this conference, and everybody else that was there was going to watch a movie that we'd already seen. So we decided we'd catch up. And the conversation was, why are we both 30 and not married? Or 28, I think, almost 30. And we realized that it was because we both wanted to do things that nobody else wanted to do, and we couldn't find somebody that was willing to be risky enough to do them. So we're having this conversation, and one of the things that we brought up was like living in an inner city and working with the poor. We talked about foster care. We talked about all these things. And we left at like 3 a.m. Our conversation was over. And I left thinking, I could marry this guy. And he left thinking probably all kinds of fearful thoughts about what that would be like for him. And then 3 days later, I literally left the country for 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
So during that time, we wrote and stuff. But we came back and I ended up deciding to finish my doctorate in Minnesota where he was. And that didn't end up panning out, but I moved back there and we started spending time together. And I was had already had 2 relationships that I thought were an end in marriage that didn't. And so I said, this is either my 3rd strike and I'm going to go back to Mexico because that's where I have been living and live there for the rest of my life and be single, or this is going to be a home run and I'm going to marry this guy. But there was like no option of me continuing to date people who weren't going to marry me because I was just like done.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Did
think
he know that?
I think he kind of knew that this was significant, but he was waiting for me to give up on him proposing. And I was waiting for him to tell me to go away, and he never did. And so eventually I think it just became easier to just marry me than to break up. I don't know. But anyway, we did. But we had talked all the time we were dating about we'd like to do foster care. And he said, yeah, we could do that right after we get married. Well, in my world, that was right after we got married. In his world, it's like 5 years. You know, that's just the difference in our personalities.
So time out, folks. Claudia time and the rest of the world time.
Claudia's today is yesterday.
Claudia works at warp speed.
Oh,
You
think so?
have to get up early in the morning to keep up with, like, if you say something's urgent,
Oh, it's got to be done in 5 minutes.
it's urgenter than
It's
anyone
urgenter.
else realizes. So yes,
well.
go ahead.
So we got back from the honeymoon and I mailed in the paperwork to be foster parents like the next day, right after we get married, right?
Mhm.
So
You said.
You said.
So less than 4 months after our marriage, our first kid moved in,
Wow.
and we fostered him. He was 20 months old when he came, and then 3 months later, our second child came, and he was 9 months when he came. And then that next February, we had 2 kids come who were 14 and 12. And we only had them for 28 days. And during those 28 days, I happened to be doing an ESL tutoring job at their school. And the teachers told me, when they moved in with you, they got straight A's. When they moved back home, they went back to straight F's.
Mm.
So they were straight F's, straight A's for 28 days, straight F's when they went back to mom.
Wow.
So we said, why do we pour all that energy just to have them go back there? Why don't we just find kids that we can keep instead of fostering and being able to be part of their lives, but not do, the ultimate? And at that same time, we found out what was happening to kids when they aged out of foster care. So this is back in 1997. And we found out all the horrible things that happened. And I'm always felt compelled to change the world in some way. And I thought, this is a way that you can totally change the world because you can affect the statistics of the future. You can affect homelessness. You can affect teenage pregnancy. You can affect how many people are incarcerated. You can affect like all the social issues of our day stem from people not having a solid relationship when they age out of foster care. So when we realized that, we decided to pursue adoption and started getting trained to adopt. And then we only took placements then that were legally free kids. So we never said we want to have 12 kids. We started out with the two that came at first as foster kids ending up getting to stay. We fostered a few more that didn't. And then in end of 97, we got our first 2 adoptive placements that were brothers that were 11 and 8. And then we decided that we were going to stick with 5 and we were going to have boys. That was our plan. 5 boys and we're done. And so we were looking for a boy that was younger than our older 2 boys, and got in contact with a social worker in New Mexico that had a boy that was 8, but he had 2 little sisters that were 6 and 4. And they were so cute. And I thought, I'm going to be the suckiest mother. Can I say sucky?
Yeah.
Suckiest mother ever to teenage girls. But these girls are really cute. And in a moment of absolute insanity that they will say probably destroyed years of their lives, we said yes to those kids and they moved in with us. And And then
So you quickly went from 2 to 5.
well, from 4 to 7.
4 to
Okay,
7. 4 to 7.
We've already lost
Yes,
track.
we've already lost track.
You've already-
So how did the conversations go between Claudia and Bart of how did you get from 5 only boys to 12?
Oh, it wasn't like overnight. It gradually happened. So when we had the 5, we were going to do 5, but we decided, okay, we can do 7. And the movie Seventh Heaven with the pastor, I don't know if anybody remembers that. That was like on that during that time. So we're like, Seventh Heaven, we're going to stop at 7. And then a few months later, we saw that there was a boy who he and his 2 siblings had been available for adoption a couple years ahead of time, and we had considered those 3 as our first adoption, but they had been placed with somebody else. But the oldest one has my dad's birthday, and so when he was back on the internet alone, we knew that family had disrupted his adoption, put him back in foster care, and kept his brothers. And so I said to Bart, we really wanted this kid to be our kid. Maybe he's still supposed to be our kid. And so that's how we went from 7 to 8.
Wow.
And
That just gave me chills hearing you say that.
yeah, it was pretty cool. And interestingly, and I don't think he would care if I said this. I'm trying to be really careful not to say things that would bother any of my kids, but he's doing great, and I don't think he would be. His file was the thickest file I've ever seen. Of all the placements he'd been in, he was in from the time he was 18 months, and now he's 11 at this point. He's been in so many placements, back home to mom, back in and out of care. He's had a disrupted adoption. He was living in a facility where he's a very affectionate kid, and he was living in a facility that was a juvenile justice facility, even though he hadn't committed a crime. Nobody was touching him there. His whole social history was based on the family that was disrupting the adoption, so they had to prove that he was impossible. So there's a huge file. So we're coming back from meeting with his social worker. And I said to Bart, he's going to be the hardest kid that we ever parent, but can you live with yourself knowing that he's going to be on the internet until he's 18 because nobody's going to adopt this kid? Can you see yourself knowing that he's there because we feel like we can't handle this? And so we said yes, and he's one of our easiest kids to raise, which is so counterintuitive, right? So that took us to 8, and then 8 is enough was on TV, and that was our new slogan, 8 is enough, right?
I'm just here thinking, I'm a mom of 2. We talked about, do we have 3? By the time you go from 2 to 3, it's not man-to-man defense anymore.
Exactly. So.
You get a different vehicle. Life looks differently. Bathrooms, bedrooms. I'm just wondering, what did meal prep look like? What vehicle did you drive? I bet you all were the talk of the town when you moved into a new church. And you didn't have to have a children's program at your church. You brought them.
the children's program.
We don't have many youth. Don't worry. The new pastor does.
The Fletchers are coming to this church.
And they've got a dozen right now.
It's kind of like Paul Revere.
Yeah.
The Fletchers are coming. Get ready.
Yeah,
I do want to say really quickly, when you just said, what did meal prep look like? What vehicle did you drive? It, made me giddy because I started thinking of Cheaper by the Dozen, which is truly one of my favorite movies of all time. I grew up on that movie. And I'm were you just, tossing English muffins to each other?
So my husband does a lot of stuff, and we divided our roles really well. It wasn't like a decision every time, but things kind of fell. I did puke and police at night.
Okay.
Why am I doing puke and police? I don't know. I just did. He goes to bed. He likes to stay there all night. So I got assigned puke and pee. He couldn't handle the puke. And then the police.
And there's a lot of puke in parenting.
Oh, there is.
They don't tell you. They wouldn't. You wouldn't.
No,
you wouldn't do it if they told you.
We don't need to do this.
Okay.
What to expect after you've had them is what. That's the book.
Yes. And so, he did all the meals, and that has been. If you ask our kids, I think our dining room table was the focal point of our family, and it still is. Whenever we get together, the meals are the big thing. My husband's an excellent cook, and we spent $3,000 a month on groceries.
Wow.
In the 90s.
In the 90s, because we would go through 3 gallons of milk. When we had so many teenage boys, we'd go through 3 gallons a day of milk.
Wow.
It was just a lot of food.
That's when you get the cow.
Yeah.
Just get a cow.
Just get a cow.
Yeah. And then laundry was the worst. That is the worst. We did 7 loads a day,
What?
6 days a week. 7
What?
loads a day, 6 days a week. When we had 10 at home. The most we had at home at a time was 10. 7 loads a day, 10 days,
Wow.
6 days a week, yeah. So anyway, that was a lot. But we're at 8 in this story. We're at 8 because you're asking me how we got to 12.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was working at my first adoption support job. This was in 2000, I think. Yeah. And I was doing a retreat for an adoption agency. And this lady approached me and she said, I know who number 9 is. And I said, oh, there is no number 9. We are not going to 9. We were content with 8. And she said, well, we have this little boy in this orphanage in Guatemala. And he is the hardest kid that's been in the orphanage in 25 years. And we've never believed that anybody can adopt him. Everyone comes down and they say, this kid is the naughtiest kid. But we love him so much, we think we can take him home. And we have never believed that any family could handle him. But if you don't take him, he's going to be sent to a government orphanage in a year. And they let them on the streets at 12.
Wow.
So you are the family for this kid. Well, my husband's home on a Saturday morning with 8 kids. And Saturday morning was the hardest because it's unstructured. They're supposed to clean their rooms. They're wild. And I'm supposed to go home and tell them we're going to get another one. I'm like, I don't want to have this conversation. I remember it distinctively the whole ride home thinking, do I even have this conversation? Because my husband tends to see all the things that can go wrong with things.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember we had the conversation and he said, well, Guatemala, we can't go to Guatemala. There's machine guns on the corners and everything and blah, 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 blah. I said, you got nothing to worry about. I used to live in Mexico. We're going to be fine. But he said, I just aren't sure we should do this. It was expensive. We didn't have the money. We wouldn't be getting any money to take care of them.
This is the first out of country.
Yeah. All the rest of them were foster kids and you get an adoption subsidy. So financially we didn't have to worry because he's a pastor. We didn't make a lot of money. So he said no. So I wrote him a letter. I wrote a letter. I said to the agency director, and I said, we've just made a decision that we cannot adopt Yimmy, was his name. And we're sorry that when he gets older, he'll have to go to the orphanage and then live on the streets, but we can't do it. We hope you find a family for him. And I handed it to Bart, and I said, you can sign this, and whenever you're comfortable putting it in the mail, you can do that. And then a few months later, we went to Guatemala and got Jimmy.
Sinister. For the best of intentions.
Savage.
Yeah.
And he is an amazing young man. He's just, he was the naughtiest kid in the orphanage. He came into my house, looked around, said, there's no way I can win here. And he settled right down. And he lives here in town and makes sure he sees us every week. And if we need help with something, he comes over to help us. And
so he found his family.
He did. And it was a great story. Well, while we were there, though, we had decided to take shoes to Guatemala for the kids that were in an orphanage. And because we brought shoes, they let us meet the other kids. They usually didn't let people do that. And there was a little boy who came and sat on Bart's lap, uninvited. And then on the way back to the hotel, Bart says, we need to get that one too, don't you?
Oh my gosh.
So then we came back. It took 3 years to get him because it was, there was a whole bunch of international law stuff that changed. So it took all that time. So then we went to 10, and then our kids started going off to college or jail. But yeah, that was sort of the choice when you got
leaving
to 18,
the house.
Either going, And I was doing a matching job where I was finding families for kids, and this profile comes with these 2 really cute little Asian boys that were 12 and 8, and they have this on the paper. There were no diagnoses. They were not on meds. They were not on an IEP. I was like, this is a lie. This profile can't be true. And every time I found a family for them, it would fall through, and they wouldn't get them because the families were matched with somebody else. So they'd been waiting way too long for kids that were in that good of shape. And so I remember I came home on the last day of school one year and told Bart, there's these kids I can't get out of my mind. They're so cute. And I told him about them. And he said, well, if they're that great, then why hasn't someone adopted them? And I just said, because they're supposed to be ours. And they've brought a lot of joy to us. And so that's how we got to 12.
Wow.
It's a long story, sorry.
It's an incredible story. Allison and I are excited to talk to you about our very first sponsor of the Mended Futures podcast, Mission House Coffee.
Mission House is locally owned, and their goal is to be a place that is known for delicious coffee, obviously, food and baked goods, and beloved care and acceptance they show to the people that they serve.
They also have their own coffee distributor called Mission House Roasters, where you can order their signature blends online and start brewing your own Mission House coffee right in your home.
One of my favorite things about Mission House and the name Mission is they have a pay it forward board where you can purchase something for someone else in the community and leave a nice note, an affirmation, or you can go to the board and pick something that applies to you. So it's a way to serve your neighbors and show love to people that we don't even know.
Mm-hmm. So come on down to Mission House Coffee and experience a place where you feel an abundant sense of love and acceptance from their staff and the community they serve.
I have a question that's not on here.
Please.
And I'm almost already crying because you keep saying they're supposed to be ours.
Mhm.
Would you tell the side A and the side B story?
Oh, yeah, sure. We had my daughter had an uninspected pregnancy when she was 16. And we weren't feeling great about our parenting journey at that point because we had several kids that had legal issues. And we had 9 teenagers at once, was just not good planning. And so life was really hard in those days, and we felt pretty much like failures. And my husband went to a preaching conference where he heard this great sermon talking about how sometimes that you believe that, 45s used to have a side A and a side B. So the hit song was on the side A, and side B was just like a whatever song they put on there that nobody ever listened to or cared about, and you never flipped the record over because you played the other one on repeat all the time. And so the sermon was, you may go through life thinking that this is your side A, but maybe something different is your side A, and really what you're doing right now is your side B. And so he came back that summer when our daughter was pregnant and said, maybe our grandchildren are our side A.
Wow.
And so I think the most fulfilling thing that I can say about what we've done is that we have all 12 of our children were either in foster care or an orphanage, and none of our grandchildren are.
Mm.
In fact, some of our grandchildren are living in nearly perfect situations with very attentive, very loving parents who are nurturing them and loving them so well. And that is just a super powerful thing to be able to behold. And I love when we all get together each summer. I love to watch my kids parenting their kids. I love to watch the cousins playing together. I love to watch our sons and son-in-laws being great uncles to our grandchildren, and our daughters being good aunts to their nieces and nephews. And they get together now at Christmas without us, the ones that live in Minnesota, and we're super happy and super sad when that happens because we wish we were there, but they care for each other. It's been a really cool piece to get to this point where we can look at that and say that.
And I'm a history teacher, and you're talking the 1990s, this all started, and you've impacted 12 lives directly, and you're already seeing the results. You're already seeing the fruits of your labor in less than 30 years.
Yeah, which is
that's
a long time to wait for seeing the fruit of something.
Yes and
But
no.
did you ever think you would see fruit?
Well, I hope we would. I mean, that's an awful lot of effort to put into something to think it's all going to end up for naught.
Mm-hmm.
But we've also, and one of the things that I've had to do all the time is just reframe stuff. You know, I can reframe. I haven't talked to a few of my kids for 3 weeks. Does that mean that I don't matter to them, or does that mean that their lives are so busy and full that they don't have time to think about me? Would I rather have them the opposite? I kind of like that they thought about me once in a while, but that's not the point. I feel blessed to have been part of their story and to see it, even if I have to sit on the sidelines and watch. But it's a lot of reframing because it can be really hard if you start, anytime we all do this, if we start looking at something from what am I getting out of it? And then when we see we're not getting what we want, then it's easy to get negative and bitter. But if we can reframe it to say, oh, maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe I should be grateful for this or that. So we've had to do a lot of that, but yeah.
It's admirable. I'm sure it's a constant.
Constant, yes.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk about this sort of phenomenon of these kids who are labeled the naughtiest and the most impossible to adopt becoming these amazing kids who just fit right into your family.
Well,
not maybe not
not
immediately.
quite like that, and not perfectly.
Sure.
But yeah.
Do you chalk that up to, is it a mislabeling? Is it the impact of stability? What do you have to say about that?
I think really it's just about commitment. So when I was a matcher for years, where trying to find adoptive families that were waiting to find the right kid and kids that were waiting for a family, and I work with the social workers of both to bring them together. And I learned that it was about the commitment, not about the kid necessarily or the family, because the journey of most of my children is pretty rocky. There's a lot that we've been through, but we've told them over and over again, no matter what you do, you will always be our kid. Like, you may not be able to live here if you're not safe, but you'll be our kid. We're never going to give up on you. And we've proven that. I mean, our kids are now 26 to 38. And so we've never given up on any of them. For a long time, that was my ringtone during the hardest years. The song by, oh, good grief. What's the name of the song?
Is it Andy Grammer?
No, it's not.
Never
You probably have never heard.
you up.
No, it was, I knew better than to ask either of you two about the song.
Yes.
It's We Live, We Love, We Forgive, and We Never Give Up. Sixpence None the Richer, I think might be the artist. So we live, we love, we forgive, and we never give up. That was my ringtone when probation officers were calling me, and social workers and therapists and schools, all the time schools, to remind me that was the posture I needed to take to defend my kids when I was talking to whoever, is that we were going to live and love and never give up and always forgive. And that's kind of what I think I can't take credit for the ones who have just decided they're going to do something different with their lives. The ones who've sought help, the ones who've gone through therapy, the ones who as adults have decided I'm going to have a better life. I can't take credit for that. That's on them. And the ones who are not there yet will be someday, hopefully. So
I want to go back to something you said a little while ago, because I've worked in public schools and I've worked with lots of government organizations. And you said something in passing that made me almost gasp, but other people may not realize it. You were talking about one of your kids who was in placement in a government facility. Nothing wrong with that. And there are rules. So as a K-12 teacher, I didn't hug students. There were students that I would have wanted to hug and pick up and take home and save. But there are rules. And some people hug. I'm not a big hugger. I'm more of a joker. But you said something about when you're in some of these facilities, they don't get affection. And I've seen that before. I've seen it firsthand, especially teenagers, older kids who are waiting for placement, go into sometimes places where other kids with behavior problems or legal trouble, or so they're in a facility just because they need a placement, and it's not a family, and it's not supposed to be a family, and there aren't hugs, and there aren't, and there are caring staff members, and there are people who are doing the best they can under the policies and the procedures. But when you said that, I knew exactly what you were talking about.
And that could be I could rant on that for a whole podcast of, if you put children in institutions and the reward that they have for completing the program is to go home, then you teach them how to live in an institutional setting and to succeed there. And once they learn that, you send them home, which is not an institutional setting, and they fail. And then the punishment for failing by the system is to go back to the institution. And there's like a revolving door, and they connect with all the other people who are in the same situation to be their underground network. If they want to run away or whatever, they create relationships like that. I have sons that will tell you that they were institutionalized young because of that. And I think they have a point. Yet, like your carrot at the end is you get to go home if you can learn how to live in an institution. And then parents can create that same environment with level systems and and guards at the door and all those things. You can't do that in a family. So they don't learn how to live in a family by going there, and then they fail again, and then they go back again. And it happens for a lot of teenagers in the system never stay in a foster home for long because they just have learned how to live in a group home, and it's different.
And nothing against the group homes, nothing against. And when Mr. Day was here, we talked about it's a system. It's a system. There are laws. There's a lot of funding. It's a whole system. But I think it's important when we talk about what you can do, what your place is on the river. If you know teenagers and you go to church with them, or you coach them, or you are a big brother, big sister, or you can have a different relationship than somebody who's working in an institution or somebody. It is so important. And I've said this, I don't know how many times, so you might get to the point where you want to edit it out. Lots of teens don't know anybody that's not paid to care for them.
Right.
And I don't know how many kids that you're trying to get to know as a teacher, as a social worker, as a foster care, that just think that no one loves me. You're just paid to do this. You're just paid to place me somewhere. You're just paid to counsel me. And they need people who are not paid. So as a woman, as a neighbor, as a church member, I can love kids differently than I could as a professional.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely true.
How do you personally cope with the complexities and challenges and whatever you want to call it of having 12 children from so many different places, so many different experiences? What do you do?
I don't overthink. I don't overfeel.
Teach me your ways.
So I think that part of it's just my personality. I'm very much a get things done person. When we had all the kids at home, I was working from home, and I think we were on autopilot for a lot of times. It was just getting through the day, getting everywhere they were supposed to be. Sports, we let our kids be in one thing a season. We couldn't do more than that.
Yeah.
But when you have 10 kids, especially high school, middle school, and they're, playing different sports and they're in choir or they're in drama or whatever, and you got to get them back and forth to all those things, that's a logistical nightmare anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we were on autopilot a lot. I think that I am by nature, and I inherited this, a very resilient and hopeful person.
Mm.
So I always thought we're in a season and this season's going to be over and we're going to look back on it. And, there are days when we really miss the chaos and we think, wouldn't it be cool just to go back to one of those family dinners where 5 kids brought a friend over? And that was what happened at our house all the time, because when you are different from other people, the friends that you can find that will be your friend tend to be people who are less than perfect friends. And then when you burn those friends, you have to go down a level. You can't go up. So the people that they invited to our house were very interesting kids, but they also were had never had a meal at a table before.
They needed you.
And they had never held hands and prayed before a meal. And they had never seen a family laugh or fight or interact. We did high and lows sometimes, what's your high and low? And when you have 12 people, that's a whole meal, right? Just to get everybody's highs and lows done. But their friends hadn't seen that. So they would bring friends. And so we think often, man, it would just be fun to just jump back in time just to an ordinary day when we had 20 people around the table or something like that. So I think there was always, this season's going to be over soon. And I learned a lot about my own amygdala and how it got hijacked and when I got triggered and how to calm myself down when that happened during a particularly rough seasons. So I think I'm probably just a weird person, but I didn't get overwhelmed. And it was my role to keep order. It was my role to administer discipline most of the time. It was my role to keep the schedule. We had 7 kids on IEPs. So if you know anything about IEPs, you have all kinds of meetings that you have to go. So I held the record, I probably still do, for one of our school districts to have 7 IEPs. And I had to do all the school stuff. That was always my job. Now, Bart got to do the nurturing. He got to do the house stuff, the cooking, the grocery shopping. He took care of all that stuff so that I could focus on having everybody be where they were supposed to do what they were supposed to do, follow our routine. I could get everybody to church on time every Sunday. And these other little people with 2 kids would walk in. I'm sorry I'm late, but it's so hard to get my kids ready. And I'd just be like, oh, brother.
Yeah, as you're talking about all the, we're usually not late, but as you're talking about all the schedules, I think it's hard to manage 2, and you're talking about 10
It was a matrix.
at a time.
It was a matrix.
Are you the product of a mended future? Like, when you look back, tell us about your childhood. Tell us about, we all got a glimpse of Grandma for a little bit because you shared publicly about your mother for years on social media.
So I've been thinking about this question, and I came up with a mic drop answer today to this.
Okay.
I'm so happy. I am not the product of a mended future, but I am the product of people who partnered with God to be future menders. Right? Because that is who my parents were. They were future menders. They lived their lives to join God in his desire to mend the futures of people. And
so it was modeled for you.
It was modeled for me that it is our job as people of faith to mend the futures of other people. And I was thinking on the way into work this morning about one of my favorite pictures of my dad is when he's across the street in inner city Denver with one of our Hispanic neighbors with his hands leaning over the fence, just accepting this guy. Memories of a man who, for some reason, decided our church steps where my dad pastored was where he would sleep off as drunk during the summer. And he was never yelled at or treated poorly. He was always treated with kindness. The friends my brothers brought home sometimes stayed for weeks and lived with us. We picked up, ironically, one of my fondest memories was when I was 16, I had learned how to drive. There was a group of people that were called boat people because they had come over from Laos. They had come over in the late 70s, and they were living in Denver in a neighborhood. And we would go to our church with the one car we had. We'd drop my dad off at work. My mom and I would go to the church. We'd pick up the 2 church vans. We'd drive back to the neighborhood, and we'd get 25 of these little Laotian kids. And we would take them to our Wednesday night program. And then you fast forward, and it was really cool because we have 2 sons who are Laotian, and their parents came over the same year that those, kids, the same year that. So
in the 70s.
In the 70s, yeah.
And the Vietnam War is still very
that's history, and
fresh.
I don't put it all together.
Wow.
But I know that it was not. Our church was pretty good about it, but they weren't thrilled that that's what we did. But that's what my mom always did. She did daycare. She ran a daycare home for years, and she took care of doctors' kids, but she also took care of people who couldn't always pay her every week, and each kid got treated the same way. She was a part of their lives in an intentional way. So they were all about, all the way through. My mom and dad, in retirement, moved to a Native American boarding school. And my mom had dreamed since she was 16 that she wanted to be a teacher, but never had gone to college. And so she started teaching at the age of 70. She taught pre-kindergarten for these Native American kids. And that was her calling when she was 16 years old. And she didn't live it out till she was 70. And she taught till she was almost 80.
Wow.
They just lived their whole lives obscurely, but with this very significant calling that every person they met that needed to have a mended future, they were going to help mend it. And so that is ingrained in me. So no, my childhood was awesome. And there was nothing, my family was great.
And you were blessed to have your mother in your life until very recently.
Till the summer, she was 95.
You've just celebrated her life.
Yeah, we did. And she was they were both phenomenal people. So I never let go of being grateful that was how my life started. My mom was 33 and my dad was 40 when I was born, and they had waited to be parents for a very long time. And I cannot imagine how spoiled I was. I got 100% of both their attention for the first 18 months until my brother came along. Like I was probably a princess, right? But they had already learned life lessons. They were mature. They were ready. So yeah, I'm very blessed.
We've heard many guests who sit on the same green velvet couch talk about how they are fostering, they have adopted, both domestically and internationally. We've talked about the movie Sound of Hope, where some people feel called and sometimes their spouses don't. And you are the second person recently to talk about how they felt called to do something and their husband didn't, and how you work through that. What do you say to people who are listening to you who think, "Oh, I don't know if I can do that." Like, what's the first easier step, or what's the first right step? Like,
What's the in?
yeah, or what do you wish people would have known when you and Bart were standing in the river with 10 children whose lives were getting ready to go over the waterfall? What would have been an easy step for your neighbor?
And see, well, we had never been good neighbors. So let's not talk about the neighborhood thing, because there's a whole long story there. But our churches were so amazing. We, during the time when we had anywhere from 8 to 10 kids, we were able to go overseas for 2 weeks at a time and divide them up between different people that went to our church, and they would keep them for 2 whole weeks at their house. Like, they were phenomenal to give us breaks. So we took a 2-week trip to England. We went to Jamaica. We every time one of us got to do something for work, the other one went along, and we found people, and they were willing to do that, be part of that village.
So you had respite care.
We had respite care, but we didn't call it respite care, and
Right.
and nobody got paid for it, and it was just community, like those people.
Mhm.
And I think because we were their pastor, it was probably more natural for them to think, well, we got to figure out how to help these people, instead of if we don't help them, they'll go away. Like, we were the pastor, so they didn't have a choice. But I think that when people say, "Are you called to step into this space?" I would say everyone is called to step into this space. There's nothing in Scripture that talks more about God's heart than the talking about the fatherless and the orphan. It's just like clear through Scripture. I mean, pure religion is what James calls it, right? And of course, I always wanted pure religion. Why wouldn't you want the best of whatever you could get, right? But I think people have this idea that if you're going to deal with orphans, however they're defined, you have to be called to do it. Otherwise, you don't. But Adam, who works at Impact Living Services, he says we're already called. Like, there is no special calling for this. It's all from Scripture. We're all called to do this as Christians. So I think the question is, how do I do it? And how do I find out how to do it? And where do I go to find out? So I mentioned earlier my point person role at Care Portal. And I am so blessed to be part of Five18, but also to be part of leadership at Care Portal, because they pay part of my salary here for me to be able to run the programs on this part of the country. And Care Portal, for people who don't know what it is, it's a connecting technology platform that drives action for children and families, and it connects the local church with these kind of people that we're talking about. Who are the kids in a school that need something, but also need a relationship? Lynchburg City Schools, Bedford County Schools are in Care Portal, and they can put a request in that said this kid needs new tennis shoes if he wants to play basketball this year. And a church can find out that, and they can take this kid shopping, and they can buy him tennis shoes, and they can get to know him. So it's the little things in the space that people can start doing. And a lot of times what happens with that is that they realize that it's not as scary as they thought it was. And that maybe teenage foster kids are scary until, wait a minute, I just took one shopping and he wasn't scary. I like him. I could invite him to live with me, and it changes their attitude. And sometimes it never goes there, but it stays where it is, which is, I'm going to develop some relationships. Your thing about people getting paid. One of my favorite stories is about one of my friends that I met through Care Portal. I've known her almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years in May. And one of our meetings, the first year I met her, she said, I've been in foster care. I've been in and out of the system. I've had lots and lots of professionals that have taken care of or have been part of my life. But she said, I was thinking the other day that outside of my family, you're the only person who's ever cared about me that didn't get paid to. And it was huge to her. And I think it probably still is. We have our ins and our outs, but I think she would still say that yes, that she knows that I care about her. She knows I'm not getting paid to, and that that's unusual in her life. She also told me that she's probably, besides me, never seen her or her mother have anything but a transactional relationship. And so Care Portal lets people have a ticket to a relationship. Now, whether the family's ready for it, whether the kid's ready for it, whether the church is ready for it or not, it may or may not be. But it opens that door, and there's all kinds of possibility with that.
So we're actually going to stop here for this episode. As we mentioned in the intro, this is going to be a two-parter. So tune back in next week to hear more about Claudia's involvement with Care Portal and her experiences more in her professional life.
You don't want to miss it.
Thank you for listening to the Mended Futures podcast, hosted by Allison Jordan and Taylor Melvin, produced by Liam Chafin, Sue England, Allison Jordan, Robert Day, Sully Jugar, and Taylor Melvin. You can find us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to see more.